Welcome to the Daily News Currents. Today is Tuesday, February 25th, and for today's headlines we have U.S. clashes with European allies at the UN over Ukraine. Farmers sue over deletion of climate data from government websites. What to know about Dan Bongino, the media personality tapped as FBI's deputy director. Michaela Schifrin seals legacy as one of skiing's greatest with historic 100-cup wins. DHS memo lays out plans to detain migrants at Fort Bliss and other U.S. bases. U.S. clashes with European allies at the UN over Ukraine. The United States voted against a resolution, backed by most of Europe, demanding Russia withdraw from Ukraine, a deep fissure between allies and a sharp shift in American policy. A showdown over Ukraine between the United States and its longtime European allies played out in the United Nations on Monday, as the United States opposed an effort to condemn Russian aggression and call for the immediate withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukraine. The Trump administration, after seeking to tone down the language, voted against the resolution and introduced its own that simply called for an end to the conflict. Both measures passed, but in siding with Russia against most of its European allies, the United States made a sharp break with the past. The face-off at the UN General Assembly on Monday, the third anniversary of the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, was a remarkable public fissure between Western allies that have typically stood together when it comes to Russia and Europe's security, demonstrating the sharp turn in U.S. foreign policy under President Trump. The three-page resolution demanding Russian withdrawal, proposed by Ukraine, also calls for a comprehensive, lasting, and just peace, and for accountability for Russia's war crimes. It said the invasion had persisted for 3 years and continues to have devastating and long-lasting consequences, not only for Ukraine, but also for other regions and global stability. The U.S. resolution was 3 short paragraphs. It did not mention Russia's aggression or condemn the invasion. It mourned the loss of life on both sides, said that the United States implores a swift end to the conflict and further urges a lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia. The UN drama came just days after President Trump called Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, who has been lauded by many Western leaders a dictator, and falsely asserted that Ukraine has started the war. 3 Western diplomats and senior UN officials said that the Trump administration had tried last week to persuade Ukraine to withdraw its resolution, and when that failed, they attempted to negotiate with European allies on a text that the Trump administration would support. But on Friday afternoon, amid negotiations, the United States told its European allies that it planned instead to put forth a dueling resolution. European diplomats said they were furious that their longtime ally had abandoned the talks cited against them. The Ukrainian resolution was adopted by a vote for 93 nations in favor to 18 against, with 65 abstaining. The assembly broke out into applause. Among the 18 countries that voted against Ukraine's resolution were Russia, the United States, Israel, Hungary, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Niger. This is a moment of truth, a historic moment, said Marina Besta. Ukraine's deputy foreign minister, addressing the General Assembly, said the way it had voted in response to Russian aggression and war crimes would define the future of Ukraine and the free world. Dorothy Camille Shea, the interim charge d'affaires, representing the United States, asked member states to commit to ending the war immediately. She said that previous UN resolutions that condemned Russia and called for it to withdraw its forces from Ukraine had failed to alter the course of the war that has killed hundreds of thousands of people. Those resolutions have failed to stop the war, said Ms. Shea. It has now dragged on for far too long and at far too terrible a cost to the people in Ukraine and Russia and beyond. When the General Assembly took up the U.S. resolution, it voted to adopt 3 amendments by European countries, adding language that called out Russia as the invading aggressor and reiterated the UN commitment to Ukraine's territorial integrity and pre-war international borders under a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace. The Assembly then approved the amended resolution by a vote of 93 to 8, with 73 abstentions. The United States abstained on the amended version of its own resolution. Richard Gowan, the UN Director for the International Crisis Group, which researches and monitors armed conflicts, says the United Nations had not seen such a consequential split between the U.S. and Europe since the war in Iraq, and that the current division was more pointed because it involved the security of Europe. European diplomats are livid with how the U.S. has maneuvered against them, said Mr. Gowen. The EU and Ukraine tried to keep Washington in the loop while drafting the resolution. The way the U.S. swung in with its own text very aggressively at the last moment has left the Europeans off balance. The UN Security Council, scheduled to meet Monday afternoon on Ukraine and the U.S., is expected to put forth the same resolution for vote. Two council diplomats said that there were efforts underway to delay the vote and allow more negotiations. A closed-door council session was added to the schedule on Monday morning. Farmers sue over deletion of climate data from government websites. The data, which disappeared from agriculture department sites in recent weeks, was useful to farmers for business planning, the lawsuit says. Organic farmers and environmental groups sued the Agriculture Department on Monday over its scrubbing of references to climate change from its website. The department had ordered staff to take down pages focused on climate change on January 30th, according to the suit, which was filed in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. Within hours, it said, information started disappearing. That included websites containing datasets, interactive tools, and funding information that farmers and researchers relied on for planning and adaptation projects, according to the lawsuit. At the same time, the department also froze funding that had been promised to businesses and nonprofits through conservation and climate programs. The purge then removed critical information about these programs from the public record, denying farmers access to resources they need to advocate for funds they are owed, it said. The Agriculture Department referred questions about the lawsuit to the Justice Department, which did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The suit was filed by lawyers from Earth Justice, based in San Francisco, and the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University on behalf of the Northeast Organic Farming Association of New York, based in Binghamton, the National Resource Defense Council, based in New York, and the Environmental Working Group, based in Washington. The latter two groups relied on the department's website for their research and advocacy, the lawsuit said. Peter Lenner, a lawyer for Earth Justice, said the pages being purged were crucial for farmers facing risk linked to climate change, including heat waves, droughts, floods, extreme weather, and wildfires. The websites had contained information about how to mitigate dangers and adopt new agricultural techniques and strategies. Long-term weather data and trends are valuable in the agriculture industry for planning, research, and business strategy. You can purge a website of the words climate change, but that doesn't mean climate change goes away, Mr. Lenner says. The sites under the department umbrella include those of the Forest Service, which is responsible for stewardship of forest and grasslands, the National Resources Conservation Service, which helps landowners implement conservation practices, and those of other divisions focused on farms and ranches, disaster recovery, and rural development. The directive to delete the pages came by email from Peter Ray, the Department Director of Digital Communications, according to the lawsuit. The plaintiffs alleged the actions violated 3 federal laws and were arbitrary, capricious, and an abuse of direct discretion, or otherwise not in accordance with law. They asked the court to compel the agency to restore the pages and block it from deleting any others. Wes Gillingham, president of the board of Northeast Organic Farming Association of New York, said that farmers were just heading into planning for the summer growing season. He said taking information down because of a political agenda about climate change was senseless. He has been farming in Livingston Manor, New York, in the Catskill Mountains for 30 years, and now raises Icelandic sheep there. He had previously grown vegetables for a community-supported agricultural program, but stopped about 20 years ago when his operation was wiped out by 3 massive floods in a 5-year period. Mr. Gillingham said his organization is the largest organic certifier in New York State, which has a major hub for small farms. They often send farmers to the Agricultural Department website for information on things like conservation programs and which agriculture practices qualify for grants and loans. They also direct people to resources like equipment lending. Right now, because of climate change and because of what farmers are facing in terms of extreme weather events, we need every piece of available information we can get, he said. We don't have access to that. We're not going to make it. What to know about Dan Bongino, the media personality tagged as FBI's deputy director. The Trump administration's pick for FBI deputy director is Dan Bongino, a former U.S. Secret Service agent turned conservative commentator whose fiery support for President Trump has earned him a massive following and seen him banned from YouTube for promoting misinformation. Bongino, 50, hosts The Dan Bongino Show, a syndicated radio show and daily podcast that was ranked 7th most popular podcast in the U.S. in January, according to the industry analysis PodTrack. Trump said in his announcement that Bongino is willing and prepared to give up his show in order to serve. Great news for law enforcement and American justice, Trump wrote on Sunday night. Dan Bongino, a man of incredible love and passion for our country, has just been named the next deputy director of the FBI by the man who will be the best ever director, Kash Patel. The role of deputy director, which supervises domestic and international operations, has traditionally gone to a career FBI agent. Bongino has never worked for the FBI, though he served in the New York Police Department. Bongino defended Patel in an episode of his podcast that aired last week titled The Golden Age of Republican Politics. Bongino said that he had known Patel for a long time. I can tell you with certainty that Kash Patel is there for one reason. He is there to make the FBI great again. Folks, if we do not have a credible deterrent to spies in this country, counterintelligence to terrorists that are planning plots here openly, some coordination entity for both transnational and interstate crime, we're not going to have a country, he added. Kash is committed to that and that only. Patel, a fierce critic of the FBI with no experience as senior law enforcement official, was narrowly confirmed by the Senate and sworn in as FBI director last week, overcoming Democrats' concerns about his loyalty to Trump and fitness to lead an agency that is supposed to be nonpartisan and independent from the White House. Republicans welcomed his confirmation, arguing he could make changes to the Bureau, which some on the right have accused of targeting conservatives in recent years. Patel, seeking to assuage doubts on his January hearing, said if confirmed, he would remain focused on the FBI's core mission. NPR has reached out to Bongino for more information about his views on the traditional independence of the FBI and to ask whether Patel was involved in his selection. With no Senate confirmation required, Bongino will soon be Patel's right-hand man. Here's what to know else about him. He's a veteran of the NYPD and Secret Service. Bongino holds an MBA from Penn State University and master's and bachelor's degrees from the City University of New York. An archived campaign website from Bongino's 2012 Maryland Senate bid says, he began his career with the New York Police Department in 1995, entering the cadet program while attending CUNY and becoming a full-time officer 2 years later. Bongino joined the U.S. Secret Service in 1999, first investigating federal crimes in the New York field office and eventually becoming an instructor at the Secret Service Training Academy in Maryland, according to the archive website. He joined the Presidential Protection Division in 2006 and served on the details for Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama. New Yorker wrote Eben Osnos, who profiled Bongino in 2022, told NPR's Fresh Air that year that Bongino was known as a competent, well-liked agent who never talked about politics. Osnos said that shortly after resigning from the Secret Service in 2011, when asked about working with Obama, Bongino praised him as a good man and father. In the years that follow, however, he repeatedly criticized the former president, his administration, as corrupt and divisive. There has been this rapid transformation of him over the course of years since then, and I think it's caught some of the people he worked with at the Secret Service very much by surprise, Osnos said. Somebody said that in this article, it's like there are two Dan Bonginos. There's the agent, and now there's the politico. Bongino had political ambitions of his own, as it turned out. He ran for U.S. Senate seat in Maryland in 2012, winning the Republican primary but losing the general election. He also ran unsuccessfully for congressional seats in 2014 and in 2016 in Maryland and Florida after relocating there with his family. He created his own media empire. After his foiled congressional bids, Bongino turned his focus towards the media and started a podcast in his basement. Originally called The Renegade Republican, it touted downloads in the millions in September 2016. To put it in clear terms, 5 or 6 years ago, he was starting a podcast in his basement, and he was putting moving blankets on the wall as a kind of homespun studio, Osno said in 2022. And then he had this extraordinarily precipitous rise through the conservative broadcasting ranks, to the point that today he has a podcast which at some points has been the #1 in the world. Osnos attributed Bongino's rapid rise to several factors, including his law enforcement background, which he says gave him credibility that endeared him to other majority conservative broadcasters, as well as his sensationalistic style and early support for Trump. When Trump was in the presidency, Gino would go on in the morning on Fox and praise his president for either things he had done or not done, and then Trump would see that and tweet about Bongino and would often talk about him in the White House, according to sources, Osnos said in the 2022 interview. Bongino's profile continued to rise through Trump's first term, as his podcast grew increasingly successful. He hosted a show on the National Rifle Association's website TV channel, NRA TV, for less than a year in 2018. My entire life right now is about owning the libs, he said in one segment, helping popularize the Republican catchphrase. In 2019, he launched Bongino's Report, a pro-Trump news aggregation site in the style of the Drudge Report. That same year, Bongino officially joined Fox News as a contributor. After the deaths of conservative talk show host Rush Limbaugh in 2021, podcast network Cumulus Media tapped Bongino to take over his slot. He also started hosting the Fox News Unfiltered on Saturday nights, a gig he held until parting ways with the network in 2023 over what he describes as failed contract negotiations. Bongino has also published about half a dozen books, some about his time in the Secret Service and others about the first Trump administration, with titles including Exonerated, The Failed Takedown of President Donald Trump, By the Swamp, and Follow the Money, The Shocking Deep State Connections of the Anti-Trump Cabal. He has been criticized for spreading misinformation. Misinformation experts say Bongino uses his platform to spread conspiracy theories and falsehoods, including about the Mueller investigation, the 2019 pandemic, and Trump's 2020 election loss. The Institute for Strategic Dialogue cited Bongino as one of the key right-wing figures, pushing false claims of voter fraud leading up to the 2022 election. He continued to amplify Trump's lies about the election being stolen, leading the human rights group Alvaz to name him one of the top 5 superspreaders of election misinformation in the weeks that followed. NPR reported in 2021 that Ashley Babbitt, the Trump supporter who was fatally shot by police while storming the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, had retweeted Bongino 50 times since the previous February. Bongino also found himself in hot water over his stance on COVID-19 precautions. In late 2021, he threatened to quit his radio show over Cumulus Media vaccine mandate, despite having been vaccinated himself. Bongino announced on his radio show on October 2020 that he had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. He told Megyn Kelly in 2024 that he had been in remission for 2 years. Bongino was permanently banned from YouTube in 2022 after violating its pandemic misinformation policy by posting a video questioning the effectiveness of masks. Following that decision, Google stopped servicing ads on Bongino's website. Bongino had repeatedly criticized the agency he has now been tapped to help oversee, including calling the FBI lost, broken, and irredeemably corrupt. In a lengthy 2022 monologue on his Fox show in which he cited the FBI's search of Trump's Florida residence, a court-authorized search related to an investigation into his handling of classified documents, as the final straw. "I mean it when I say it. It's way past time to clean this FBI house up," he said. "They have burned every last shred of faith and trust and freedom-loving Americans had in it." American skier Mikaela Shiffrin seals legacy as one of skiing's greatest with historic 100 World Cup wins. 3 months after a bruising crash that resulted in a punctured abdomen and left her traumatized, American Mikaela Shiffrin made history on Sunday, becoming the first athlete in alpine skiing to win 100 World Cup races. "Everyone's been so nice and supportive. All of my teammates and competitors and coaches in the whole World Cup," Shiffrin said at a press conference on Sunday. "I'm so grateful. Thank you, and the fans, thank you." The accomplishment was especially poignant, given that Shiffrin's first attempt at her 100th World Cup title ended in a serious fall last November. The 29-year-old endured a deep puncture wound in her abdomen, severe muscle trauma, and mental and psychological stress in the aftermath, the Associated Press reported. Shiffrin spent 2 months recovering. In her first competition back, she finished in 10th place during a slalom event in Crutchfield, France in January. But on Sunday, in Sestare, Italy, Shiffrin made a fierce comeback, dominating down the slopes and finishing in 0.61 seconds, ahead of Croatia's Zrinska Lujic. In doing so, Shiffrin became the first alpine skier to secure a triple-digit record, further solidifying her place as one of skiing's greatest legends. She doesn't just want to win, she blows the competition away, Australian skier Anne-Marie Moiser-Prol, who has won 62 World Cup titles, told FIS World Cup. Moiser-Prol added, "One thing is certain for me, Mikaela is and will remain the best ever." Shiffrin, a 2-time Olympic champion, has already held the title for most World Cup victories when she secured her 87th World Cup race in March at 2023. At the time, she surpassed the previous record set by Sweden's Ingmar Stenmark in 1989. Shiffrin's remarkable feat comes after the 278 World Cup starts over 14 years. Her debut race was in March 2011 at just 16 years old. Of her 100 wins, 63 have come from slalom events, while 37 have stemmed from non-slalom events. At 18, Shiffrin took home gold at the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi and became the youngest ever winner, male or female, of an Olympic slalom gold medal. She went on to claim gold and silver at the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang. DHS memo lays out plan to detain migrants at Fort Bliss and other U.S. bases. The Trump administration is developing plans to build immigration detention facilities on U.S. military bases around the country, according to an internal memo obtained by NPR. The Department of Homeland Security is asking the Department of Defense for help detaining immigrants without legal status, according to the DHS memo, a step that could significantly expand the military's role in immigration enforcement. The memo sent earlier this month from Juliana Blackwell, the acting executive secretary at DHS, lays out a plan to use Fort Bliss near El Paso, Texas, to stage detainees for removal from the United States. The request is still in the planning stages, according to a Defense Department official who is not authorized to speak publicly. But if activated, the plan could dramatically expand detention capacity to support President Trump's push for mass deportations. Fort Bliss would initially detain up to 1,000 migrants during a 60-day evaluation period, the memo states, and could eventually hold as many as 10,000 immigrants while serving as a central hub for deportation operations. Fort Bliss could then serve as the model for as many as 10 other holding facilities on a military base nationwide, including Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst in New Jersey, Niagara Falls Air Reserve Station near Buffalo, New York, Hill Air Force Base in Utah, and Homestead Air Reserve Base near Miami. There is some precedent for using U.S. military bases to house immigrants. The Biden administration stood up a temporary shelter for unaccompanied migrant children at Fort Bliss and also housed tens of thousands of Afghans in military bases in Wisconsin, New Jersey, and elsewhere after the fall of Kabul. On Friday, the Trump administration removed the acting head of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement amid dissatisfaction with the pace of arrests and deportations. The lack of detention space may be one obstacle. ICE's existing detention facilities are at full capacity, with more than 41,000 immigrants in custody, according to the most recent data from DHS. At a White House press briefing last week, Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller pledged to use every element and instrument of national power to accelerate deportations of immigrants with criminal convictions and final orders of removal. We are shortly on the verge of achieving a pace and speed of deportations this country has never seen before, Miller said. That is all for today. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.